Korea's political parties launched their campaigning for the June 4th local elections, with safety hogging their campaigns in the wake of the April ferry disaster. Samsung Electronics shares rise even after news of its chairman Lee Kun-hee's health challenges, on expectations that its succession plan may gain traction. And Nigeria says it's not taking up on Boko Haram's offer to free imprisoned Islamic militants in return for the kidnapped schoolgirls. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I am Kang Tae-ri. 3 weeks to go before the June 4th local elections here in Korea, and the ruling and opposition parties are set to launch their respective campaigns. The ruling Saenuri Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy will complete their candidate nominations before registration start on Thursday, setting the stage for candidates to hit the campaign trail on May 22nd. 17 provincial and city seats will be up for grabs. And earlier today, the parties released campaign pledges largely focused on boosting national safety and crisis management systems in the wake of last month's ferry accident. Ji Myung-gil tells us more.
The government's poor initial response to the Seoul ferry accident last month has outraged the Korean public. The insufficient safety measures and lack of capacity to handle such accidents are likely to dominate the campaign period over the next few weeks, heading into Election Day on June 4th. Both the ruling Saenuri Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy have called on the National Assembly to conduct a special investigation to come up with ways to help lawmakers write better bills aimed at preventing future accidents. The ruling party's candidate for Seoul Mayor Chung Mong-jun promised he would prioritize safety issues if elected and carry out massive reforms on the capital's safety management system. Current Seoul Mayor Park Won-jun has also decided to put the issue at the center of his election campaign to reflect mounting public demands for a safer Seoul. It's something we're likely to see in the other metropolitan and provincial races leading up to June 4th. With public distrust of government growing in recent weeks in light of the Seoul ferry disaster, the results on Election Day could very well depend on which party the people trust more to institute change. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
President Park Geun-hye, who is soon to expected to apologize to the nation for the government's failure to prevent the recent ferry disaster, continued discussing related matters with her cabinet on Tuesday. Referring to similar discussions she had with senior secretaries over the weekend, President Park asked cabinet members for their ideas on laying the groundwork for a national emergency response system. After apologizing directly to the people, the president will give details of a new master plan to bolster national safety and a new ministry to oversee emergency response and management. She is also expected to talk about reforms in public service to root out irregularities that are blamed for having caused the ferry disaster.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Tae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. Samsung Electronics Chairman Lee Kun-hee is reportedly recovering from his heart attack and is currently receiving hypothermia treatment in hospital. The Samsung Medical Center in southern Seoul says Mr. Lee was scheduled to end the treatment this morning, but the doctors decided to continue with it to minimize any possible damage to the 72-year-old's heart and brain. Hypothermia treatment keeps the body at a temperature of between 32 to 34 degrees Celsius to prevent toxic materials from generating in the blood. Even after that treatment ends, doctors say they will keep Lee sedated for the time being. He is reportedly in stable condition and breathing on his own. And as for the market reaction, we saw a positive take on the news of his health challenges. Samsung Electronics shares gained over the last 2 days with a jump of close to 4% yesterday. Kim Ji-yeon explains what's behind this trend.
One day after Samsung Electronics Chairman Lee Kun-hee was hospitalized, shares of the tech giant gained the most they had in 9 months. Shares of the company jumped 4% on Monday, closing the day at around $1,400. They continue with the gains on Tuesday as well, up nearly 0.9%. Analysts say Samsung's succession plan played a big part in the gain, as the company has a contingency for such events. Lee's son Tae-yong is likely to inherit Samsung Electronics, the flagship of the group. He and his 2 sisters will be splitting up some of the group's other affiliates.
There are a lot of expectations about a speedy restructuring and succession due to the deteriorating health conditions of Chairman Lee Kun-hee. During the restructuring process, the most likely scenario is that Samsung Electronics will buy more of its own shares, leading to an increase in share prices.
Samsung Securities Company, Korea's largest brokerage by market value, will sell its entire stake to Samsung Life Insurance Company. Another affiliate information and communication technology provider, Samsung SDS Company, plans to sell shares in Korea this year. Behind me, that's the hospital where Lee Kun-hee is being treated, and his health is on the minds of global investors. But this is not the first time. Lee was hospitalized back in 2008 and again in 2009, and both times shares of Samsung Electronics gained, suggesting that the company is not entirely dependent on just one individual. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
And staying with Samsung Electronics showed off a bigger stake of the global tablet PC market in the first quarter of this year. Market research firm Strategy Analytics says Samsung made up 22.6% of the market share in that period. Apple held on to its #1 position with 29% market share. But analysts note a significant drop in Apple's figures, with the company having enjoyed a 40% market share in tablet PCs in the first quarter of last year, noting that Samsung has been able to expand its presence through diverse product portfolios. The research firm predicted the South Korean firm will continue to narrow the gap with Apple. While the per capita GDP of Korea has grown at a steady pace over the years, the Park Geun-hye administration is not satisfied. Its goal is to hit the $40,000 mark by 2017. But our Park Ji-won tells us the goal is ambitious and won't come without challenges.
One of the key goals set by the Park Geun-hye administration is achieving a per capita GDP of over $40,000 by the end of her term in 2017. There's a long way to go, as last year the figure came in at about $24,000. So what challenges are likely to face the Korean economy as it aims for the $30,000 and $40,000 milestones? Experts say the first one is expanding domestic demand.
As Korea's export-driven economic growth has somewhat reached its limit, the expansion of domestic demand will be the key to achieving a per capita GDP of more than $40,000. It's important to have a virtuous cycle of creating new markets in the leisure, culture, and welfare sectors that will bring about further employment and output expansion.
Experts point out those sectors have ample room to grow in the Korean economy. The recently released OECD Better Life Index shows Korean people work over 2,000 hours a year, far higher than the OECD average of some 1,700 hours. And the sectors related to achieving a better work-life balance have potential to grow. Increasing domestic demand in the sectors could also help address the nation's widening income gap. According to the latest OECD figures, people in Korea's top 20% income bracket were earning nearly 6 times as much as the bottom 20% last year, which hinders healthy growth and domestic consumption. While the focus has been on bumping up the nominal per capita GDP, experts say it ultimately doesn't mean that much. The key, they say, is developing an economy that achieves real, robust growth. For example, it took the U.S. 17 years to jump from a per capita income of $20,000 to $40,000, and it took Japan 8 years. The achievement was due mainly to the appreciation of yen rather than from real growth, which made the Japanese economy less competitive in export markets and ultimately led to an economic slowdown. To avoid such risks, experts stress it's important to institute appropriate measures to induce real growth in the lesser developed areas of the economy. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Korea's exports of products related to information and communications technology were up 4.5% on year in April. Nearly $15 billion worth of ICT products were shipped out last month on the back of strong demand from China and the United States. Trade officials say strong exports of mobile handsets and semiconductors offset external uncertainties, including unstable consumer sentiment in emerging economies. The $7.5 billion surplus in the sector last month contributed to the country's overall trade surplus. And as for the latest regarding the probe into the Sewol-ho ferry disaster, it's proving to be quite difficult. It has been progressing quite slowly in recent days as some key figures have been refusing to show up for questioning. This stonewalling has prompted the prosecution to get tough. Kwon So-ah has the latest.
The weeks-long investigation into the Sewol-ho ferry disaster is struggling to shift into top gear as key figures are refusing to show up for questioning. In order to turn the screws on the no-shows, prosecutors are raising the legal stakes. Prosecutors have been granted an arrest warrant for the first son of the practical owner of the ferry, Yoo Byung-un, Yoo Dae-gyun, who did not appear for questioning on Monday. They also got permission to raid Yoo's home, but a group of over a dozen prosecutors, police, and firemen looking for him failed to locate his whereabouts, which means he may be in hiding. Yoo Byung-un, the former Semo Group chairman and practical owner of the Sewol-ho ferry's operator Cheongjin Marine Company, has been summoned to appear before prosecutors on Friday by 10 a.m. This comes after Yoo's two sons and first daughter failed to appear for questioning. The Yoo family and its close associates are suspected of being involved in embezzlement and tax evasion and a direct connection to the ferry sinking, as safety measures were ignored in renovating the ship and also during the process of overloading cargo on the ship. The latest investigations have revealed that Yoo Byung-un was involved in the management of the ship just 2 months before the accident. That's why the Joint Investigation Headquarters believes Yoo could be the top person in charge and the person most responsible for the disaster. Meanwhile, financial authorities are delving deeper in possible monetary irregularities. The Financial Supervisory Service says it began a new probe a couple of days ago on the National Federation of Fisheries Cooperatives and Sinan Capital, which have granted loans to Yoo Byung-un's associates in the past. This comes as financial authorities vowed to leave no stone unturned with relation to Yoo's finances. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Korea and Japan will hold a second round of talks this week on the still unresolved issue of Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women during World War II. But many are skeptical that any concrete progress will be made this time around. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
Senior diplomats from Korea and Japan will continue talks this week on Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. Seoul's Foreign Ministry said Tuesday that Lee Sang-duk, Director General of the Northeast Asian Affairs Bureau, will meet with his Japanese counterpart Junichi Ihara on Thursday in Tokyo. The South Korean ministry said it has been holding consultations with comfort women since their first meeting with Japan last month.
Government officials, including those from the Foreign Ministry, are currently collecting the opinions of the comfort women and others related to the victims. This will be the basis of our stance in the upcoming talks with Japan.
More than 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve the Japanese military at comfort stations in the early 20th century. Tokyo claims the issue was settled through a 1965 treaty when the two countries normalized diplomatic ties. The comfort women are demanding an official apology and legal compensation from Japan. The two sides may also discuss other matters, including Korea's import restrictions on Japanese fishery products that were imposed amid radiation concerns in the aftermath of the Fukushima nuclear plant disaster. Japan's push to regain the right to collective self-defense may also come up during this week's talks. Not much progress was made at the first meeting, but remarks made by U.S. President Barack Obama during his visit to Seoul last month are fueling hopes for some concrete results at the upcoming talks.
This was a terrible, egregious violation of human rights, even in the midst of war. Was shocking.
But Tokyo's sincerity in settling the comfort women issue still remains in question, as Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has recently refused to follow in the footsteps of Germany in addressing its wartime atrocities. 황상희, 아리랑 뉴스.
The U.S. says it's launching aerial surveillance missions over Nigeria to help find the hundreds of schoolgirls kidnapped by Islamist militants. With more on that and other global headlines, we now turn to Paul E. standing by for us at the News Center. Paul, it's been nearly a month since these girls were abducted, but a new video has emerged online showing their condition.
That's right, Chetty. It's the first time the world has seen the kidnapped girls since they were taken in the middle of the night from their boarding school. In a video released by Boko Haram, the girls say they've converted to Islam but appear to be unharmed. Our Kim Yeon-bin has more on the terror group's ransom offer.
The Nigerian terror group Boko Haram released a 27-minute video on YouTube Monday, in which they say they'll release some of the teenage girls they kidnapped last month in exchange for jailed fighters.
Wallah, billahi alladhi la ilaha illahu, ha'ula'i al-banat la natrukuhunna illa ba'da ma taraktum ikhwanana.
Around 130 of the abducted girls were shown in the video wearing full veils, citing the first verse of the Quran. The Nigerian government says it is reviewing all options, but the nation's interior minister appeared to dismiss the offer, saying no exchange would take place. Nigeria has deployed 2 army divisions for the search and rescue operations, while several countries, including the United States, France, and Israel, have sent experts to the region. U.S. State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki on Monday said that Washington has deployed manned surveillance aircraft to Nigeria and is sharing commercial satellite imagery with the Nigerian government to help in the search. Boko Haram militants abducted more than 300 schoolgirls in mid-April from a boarding school in the north of Nigeria. Some have since escaped, but well over 200 are still being held. The militant group has been engaged in violent campaigns against the Nigerian government since 2009. Kim Yeon-bin, ARIRANG News.
And moving on to the deepening crisis in Ukraine, Paul, Sunday's referendum votes were wrapped up with pro-Russian groups claiming victory. So where do we go from here?
Well, for the meantime, celebrations are taking place in the eastern Ukrainian cities of Donetsk and Luhansk, with pro-Russian separatists claiming the regions as independent states. The official results of Sunday's elections were announced on Monday, giving the rebels a landslide victory for self-determination. But the U.S. and scores of EU member nations are calling into question the credibility of the results. Upon his arrival in Kiev, the European Council's President Herman Van Rompuy called the referendums illegal and illegitimate.
We will not recognize the annexation of Crimea and Sevastopol. Likewise, we do not recognize the so-called referenda.
Meanwhile, the U.S. military began conducting massive nuclear arms drills just days after Russia carried out similar exercises. The U.S. Strategic Command said the drills will run through May 16th, with B-52 heavy bombers taking part in the nuclear deterrence drills.
Now, moving on to the United States, Singapore's foreign minister has arrived in Washington for talks with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, and it looks like they've sent a strong message to China.
While standing alongside his Singaporean counterpart, State Secretary John Kerry reiterated the U.S.'s concerns about China's recent, quote, challenge to the Paracel Islands. Last week, China butted heads with Vietnam when a giant Chinese oil rig was placed in an area of the South China Sea, also claimed by Hanoi. Kerry called on the creation of a maritime code of conduct to peacefully resolve the situation.
There are many issues of concern where we think alike and we work in partnership. One of them, most recently, obviously, is the Chinese challenge to the Paracel Islands, and we are particularly concerned, all nations that are engaged in navigation and traffic within the South China Sea, East China Sea, deeply concerned about this aggressive act.
In response, Beijing's foreign ministry has urged Kerry to objectively and fairly look at the South China Sea dispute, while accusing Singapore of trying to position other countries against China.
And Paul, staying in the United States, health authorities have confirmed another case of this deadly MERS virus. So what can you tell us about this latest patient?
Well, the second MERS patient on U.S. soil has been identified as a 44-year-old healthcare worker who lives and works in Saudi Arabia. The patient was visiting relatives in the state of Florida and became suddenly ill and was later admitted to hospital. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says quarantine measures have been enacted and that they were working closely with their international counterparts on follow-up measures. The first case was reported 2 weeks ago in Indiana, but CDC officials say the two cases are not related. MERS was first discovered in the Middle East in 2012, but researchers say very little is known about the deadly virus, which has also spread to Europe. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is holding an emergency meeting to prevent further outbreaks.
The recent surge in number of cases that we have seen in Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, as well as some cases that have been exported to other countries, raised public concern and raised questions whether the virus has changed in any way.
MERS, or Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, causes fever and kidney disease, but is not considered highly contagious. However, there is currently no vaccine or no known cure for MERS, which has killed about 800 people worldwide since 2002. Chetty?
All right, Paul, thank you very much for that update as always, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours. And it's time now to get an update on the weather conditions with our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, today it was hot. This afternoon we could see some people walking around in short sleeves and shorts.
That's right. The mercury soared to 26 degrees here in Seoul with absolutely sunny skies, but the southern regions will gradually be at the edge of a high-pressure system from waters south of Jeju. Now, this will lead to late-night showers on Jeju, and through tomorrow, about 10 to 40 millimeters of total precipitation is forecast, so an umbrella will definitely come in handy. Otherwise, earlier today, Gumi of Gyeongsang-Pukto province soared to a hot 31 degrees. More sunny and early summer-like conditions are forecast for tomorrow for most parts of the country. Now, a big gap in temperatures between the day and night will continue. Seoul starts off the day at 14 degrees with a high of 26. Gwangju and Busan reach 22. Let's see how other regions are looking. Daejeon tops out at 25 degrees, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang peak at 18 and 16. That's all the updates I have for Korea, and here's a look at the international weather.
And that will end this edition of ARIRANG News. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you back here at 10 p.m. Korea time.